Hi, welcome. Today we are interviewing Dr. Traci Moreno for our 2022 Summit on Executive Function. So Dr. Traci Moreno is a psychologist. She is a coaching psychologist specifically from Free Spirit Coaching and Psychological Services, which is a company that she owns, and she's out in Arizona. So if you get a chance, it'd be a fantastic place to go visit. Freespiritcoaching.org is her website, and you can give her a call at 480-220-0020. And I'm going to send this back to you, Dr. Moreno. So please tell us a little bit about what Free Spirit Coaching and Psychological Services is all about.
So we do a mind, body, spirit approach to our treatment. So we have a team of practitioners here that I am a licensed psychologist. So I do traditional psychotherapy, and we have another primary therapist that does traditional psychotherapy. But then our other practitioners have alternative methods. So we offer equine assisted coaching. We offer spiritual coaching, crystal Reiki healing, Thai massage. We have a wonderful teepee on our property. And so they do Thai massage therapy in the teepee, therapeutic yoga, and sound healing.
Wow. So I think you're going to have to describe each one of these therapies a little bit so that if it's something new to our listeners, maybe they have a better understanding of what that is. Now, personally, I've tried all of these, not at your particular venue, but in other places, and I think they're all fabulous, but maybe you could explain them.
Sure. So in terms of the spirituality piece, it's always important to note that our treatment has nothing to do with religion, and we do not discuss any concepts or theories that aren't congruent to the client's belief system. So with that said, our form of treating spirituality is more about energy and universal concepts in general, like just the importance of self-love and self-care and positive thinking. The spiritual aspect is, about universal laws, kind of like the law of attraction, karma, manifesting, intention setting, things like that. And then Reiki, crystal Reiki healing is, if you're not familiar with Reiki, that is working with the practitioner, works with the energy in and around us. And because a lot of times when we're stressed and going through anything, our energy can get blocked at certain spots in our life.
For those of you who've never tried Reiki, it is absolutely amazing. I did it regularly for at least a full year, and I have to tell you, it made a huge difference in my life when I was going through some difficult times. So,
and then we have the Thai massage, which is wonderful. It's nothing like a Swedish massage at all, if you've ever had one. He works with meridian points and pressure points on the body. And the reason it's part of our mental health treatment is because, we hold our symptoms in the body, and we can have these blockages at certain points, and we hold on to them. So that's a physical way that he can help people release those blockages in the body.
And then I think Reiki also has a similar concept,
Yes, it releases, it moves the energy and fixes the energy. Exactly. And then sound healing is similar to the concept of Reiki. It's using sound is affecting the energy in and around us, as sound does. And as anybody is familiar with the power of sound, say if you hear a certain song, it brings back a certain memory. And so it affects us and our energy in that way. And so it's also a way to move that energy and unblock us and balance us. Same thing if kind of like when you're at a concert and you can actually feel the vibrations in your body. So it's similar to that.
And a lot of people think it's kind of woo-woo, but I encourage anyone who's listening to this to actually go out and do some research, because this is all research-based. Yes. We are not just making this stuff up. This is absolutely research-based, and it's absolutely wonderful for your mind, your body, your spirit. So absolutely wonderful.
It's also helped me personally so much, and it is. And thank you for that, because research is key. And, you know, and if you can go the holistic approach, why not? I mean, what do you have to lose? And a lot of times you just try it one time. That's what I tell people. Give it one session and see how you feel.
I can swear that it works.
Yeah,
I mean,
me too.
I can tell you it's absolutely
and there actually
amazing.
is a lot of scientific evidence that it does. Like you said, it's becoming more evidence-based.
Yeah, I know that years ago, you know, doctors would kind of snub their noses up at everything that we're talking about today, but not anymore. It is clearly, there's definitely evidence based around this, and you can definitely look it up and have a better understanding of how to use it with your life. So let's talk today. We're going to talk about trauma and how you address trauma. So anyone who's actually had some trauma in their life, whether it be emotional or physical or psychological, or however that trauma came into your life, we're going to talk about that. So let's actually talk about the different types of trauma first. What are the different types of trauma that you address, or in general?
Okay, so we have simple, complex, and developmental trauma. Developmental trauma is fairly probably the newest one. Simple trauma is when we have trauma over a single experience. So that could be maybe, you know, a car accident, a house fire, maybe you were robbed or something like that. And then a complex trauma is several different traumatic events that can add up over time. So, and that would include, well, it could be being in a domestic violent relationship, you know, where there's repeated instances of abuse, or childhood abuse.
Or even a fall, like my mom fell in October, then she fell again in January. Right. I'm pretty sure that was very traumatic for her individually, but it was very different because it happened, it was more complex because it happened several times.
Right. And I'm glad that you used that as an example, because obviously the ones I used are extreme examples, but there's also things like, well, that gets into developmental trauma. So developmental trauma is any sort of stressful experiences that we would go through the developmental stages in our life. So usually, generally, adolescence and childhood. And that could be like maybe a parent's divorce, going through child custody, being bullied, or being in a bad relationship, you know, being cheated on, having problems in school, things like that.
Or so even that can cause multiple trauma, of those traumas together.
Right, exactly.
Wow. What are some of the common symptoms of trauma? What do you consider, like, how would somebody know if they have a symptom of trauma other than they know they had the experience?
So when there's a trauma response, we go into a fight, flight, or freeze mode. If for people that aren't aware of that, it's the way we respond to a kind of a threatening situation. And we either fight, which means we attack, we flight is when we run away, and freeze is just when we're basically in shock and we're not able to react at all. So with that, some of the symptoms that come with it is nightmares. There could be hypervigilance, which is like when you're kind of always on guard and jumpy. There could be avoidance of certain people, situations, places that will remind us of the trauma. There's triggers usually that happen that will remind us of the trauma. We have impairments in functioning, and that would be things like emotional instability, fear, and certain changes in our lifestyle, maybe the inability to maintain work and relationships. Then we usually start to have false belief systems. And generally, we all have false belief systems from that we've developed unconsciously through childhood, but these end up becoming much more of a impairment in our life. So some of those could be, you know, that question of that fear of, will it happen again, right? Like maybe what your mom could be experiencing, or what, maybe I caused this. You know, that's a common theme with childhood abuse, is that they think they caused it somehow. Then I could have prevented it. There could have been something, you know, that I did or didn't do.
As if they had control.
Exactly. And that's usually apparent with that freeze response, you know, and it's like, why didn't I do anything? I could have stopped it. I could have done this. I could have done that. And then with that, we develop again, those like catastrophizing, which is, you know, just kind of like everything, no matter how big or small, is just a huge catastrophe. We have black and white thinking, where it's like all or nothing. We start to become either hypersensitive, overly sensitive, or just kind of numb to things. And there is no in between. You know, it's either we're like overly engaged, or we're not engaged at all. And that also sends us into the concept of presence, right? Because we're in that mode, in the two extremes, it's really hard for people to just be present. There's also fear-based beliefs, and people may become more negative or pessimistic than usual. Everything's a worst case scenario. Everything's an assumption. It's you know, I'm the problem, certain things like that.
Yeah. Or they blame somebody else. Like I see a lot of like people, if they've been abused, for example, it's like all women are bad, or all men are bad, or
yes, generalization.
You know, they generalize.
Yes. That's another false belief system. Thank you. Yes, definitely generalizations. And those generalizations can be so vast. I mean, it could be gender, it could be race, it could be religion. It can really apply to anything at all. It could be just groups of people, you know, being around so they won't go anywhere where there's large groups of people anymore, or be alone with a certain person. So it doesn't have to be like one particular thing.
Right. So why is it that two people could experience the exact same traumatic event, and yet one person can end up with PTSD and another may not end up with PTSD? Why would those two situations differ? To me, it's almost like when you drop a vase, sometimes it shatters and you cannot fix it again. And sometimes it has like 3 or 4 broken pieces, but you can still put it back together.
Right.
That's what it reminds me of.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy. So when I was going through my doctoral program, that was the $1 million question. And they've answered it now. It can be answered. And what it comes down to is really safety as a child. So for people who generally felt safe as a child, they are less likely to develop PTSD when they experience something bad like that, or a traumatic experience. People who didn't generally feel safe as children are more predisposed to getting PTSD or continuing any sort of trauma response. I like to refer to it as a trauma response, because PTSD is the extreme version, right, of these symptoms. But people can have these trauma response and it still needs treatment. And you know, you still need help, and you still need to process this stuff. You don't need to have full-blown PTSD.
Yeah, absolutely. So how does trauma affect somebody? How does it affect us? Like, what does it do to us physiologically, mentally? How do we know we're having some issues with trauma?
So trauma, the first thing, like I said earlier, is one of the things is we're not present. You know, we're either stuck in the past or worrying about the future. And our symptoms are held in the body. So the mind, like I like to say, the mind has a mind of its own and our body has a mind of its own, right? And sometimes they're on, opposite pages. And so we lose that mind body connection, which is also why the mind body spirit approach to treatment is so important. So our mind knows that we're not in danger currently, let's say 10, 20 years after your trauma, the traumatic event. Our mind can process and rationally say, why am I experiencing this? This is so, usually people with the self-deprecating thoughts is, this is so stupid. What is wrong with me? That kind of stuff. And they know they're not in current danger. However, their body holds the symptoms and their body believes that it's still in danger. And so it's still functioning in that survival mode, that fight, flight, or freeze mode. So that's why we end up putting ourselves in like this internal conflict, because our mind is telling us we're fine, there's nothing to worry about, but our body is signaling us that it's in danger. And that's one of the biggest reasons why we have to, part of the psychotherapy is don't fight your body, right? Because you're fighting yourself. We have to be a little bit more compassionate and understand why our body is reacting in this way, right? Because there is a very good reason why it is reacting that way. And that's probably why the person is still here. It went into survival mode and it saved you, physically at least, right? And so our body is not the enemy, right? Like I always say, your anxiety is not your enemy. It's there to protect us. It's just a little overreactive right now, but beating it up is not the answer. So we have to protect it and have an understanding of what we went through in the past and what we're going through currently. And so in that, our neural pathways with trauma, our neural pathways begin to change, and we're no longer able to process information in like a logical, rational manner.
Right.
So, right. And so the concept of, so the basis with this new research of trauma is that the right brain hemisphere holds our emotions, let's say. I'm simplifying this a lot, but the right brain hemisphere holds our emotion and our self-perception, right? Just our perception of things. And then the left hemisphere and the frontal lobe are our ability to be logical and reasonable and to produce language, right? That's key. So now think about how we've been treating therapy forever in the past through talk therapy, right? And the old ways was systematic desensitization, right? You've got to talk about it until it loses its intensity,
right?
Or exposure therapy, which is like, well, we just need to keep putting you in the same situation. Right.
Yeah. But if you're afraid of getting on that elevator, let's keep
getting on that elevator until right. Exactly. Basically what is happening is a lot of people are being re-traumatized through this. And so the whole treatment, the whole idea of concept of treating trauma is completely different now.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how treatment has changed and what is this new research and how does this research affect how you do your work with individuals who have trauma now?
It's really night and day, because like I said, the old way was talk therapy.
Right.
And if somebody is having a difficult time or being re-traumatized or having flashbacks, things like that, or having physiological responses to even thinking or talking about their trauma, how are we going to do talk therapy? Right. So we have to, that's where the body spirit approach comes in. So there are so many things that we need to do. One, we need to connect the mind, body, spirit, right? We have to practice being present and comfortable in our body. So some of the things that help in the beginning are acupuncture is great, massage. You know, a lot of people don't like being touched, right? They're very closed off and, you know, muscles are contracted, things like that. And so massage, it opens up the body. So even hugging, holding hands, you know, being able to just feel again, grounding exercises, breathing exercises. There's meditation. There's a tapping technique that is helpful, and yoga. And believe it or not, yoga has actually been well researched to be a better treatment for trauma than medication.
I would totally probably agree with that. I did yoga for 10 years and I loved it. I stopped when I started gaining some weight and certain poses just got impossible.
Yeah. Okay. But so that's a good example. So, you know how you hold a certain pose and you can't be thinking of, you know, like I said, worrying about the past or the future.
Right.
You have to be completely present and in your body to be able to hold those poses. So it's like mentally impossible to be anywhere else. So this is why these are the reasons, because of course, when you, without fail, when I recommend yoga to clients, you know, it's like, oh, you know, it's like yoga, meditation, and journaling. And they're like, I could have gotten that from a self-help book, you know, thanks
exactly.
You know, they're like, no, I want this solution right now. So it's also really important to explain the reasoning why, you know, so they can really understand why is yoga important. It's not fitness. It's not for exercise. It's for what we were just explaining.
Exactly.
So, then some other ones, if I won't go through different the specifics. I'm sure most of those are self-explanatory, other than maybe the tapping. The tapping is like the technique where you take, you know, your two fingers and you kind of tap in different areas of different pressure points, you know, in your different pressure points, like off on your face. And what this does is it helps us be present, you know. And so what you can do is you go through like the different pressure points in your face and kind of the collarbone area here. And you can, what I like to do too is recite like some sort of mantra, some simple mantra, like, you know, you are enough, you know, you are loved, you are okay. Things like that.
Yeah, no, I love tapping. That's another thing that I actually use in my work as well. So I love it. You and I have a lot of crossover in what we do. Yeah. I mean, I do hypnotherapy and meditation, and I recommend yoga all the time. And I just absolutely love tapping. It's a really great technique, and it's a really good tool.
By touching ourselves on these pressure points, what it does is it brings us present. Right. And every single one of these coping skills that I listed, it's about getting us, you know, out of that rabbit hole of being in the past or the present. I mean, being in the past or the future, and bringing us present. Right. No, I do want to say about meditation. Meditation is another eye roller for clients. So
because they don't know how to do it.
Right, exactly. And especially with anxiety, meditation is silent meditation is practically impossible. Not really, but it's not such a great choice of coping skill when you're highly anxious like that. So I always recommend guided meditation. And there's great apps. One of my favorite apps, which is free, is Insight Timer. And they have everything, you know, you can think of on there. And you just pick something, and all you're doing is you sit there, lay there. You don't have to, you know, you don't have to lay in the traditional meditation pose, and you just listen to it and you follow along. But what it's doing is the guided meditation is engaging your senses. So and you're just listening to the teacher guide you along with what to be thinking and what to feel and what to envision and things like that. So again, that's taking you from out of what you were thinking about before that was making you anxious, and bringing you to the present.
Well, I think there's passive meditation, there's active meditation, and I have to explain that to my clients all the time it's about your brain waves. It's really not about you sitting on the floor. It's about changing your brain waves.
Yes.
So you can meditate by taking a walk on the beach.
Yes.
And I think once you explain that it's about the brain waves, then they're like, oh, okay. So if I do certain activities, it counts as meditation. And I think that's the key thing for a lot of people. They just think they have to sit on the floor, cross their legs, put their feet up.
Yeah.
No.
So I always say
that's one type of meditation.
Yeah. I always say running is my meditation. So you're right. And it's just really about calming our mental and physiological state and clearing our mind. And that is the only way that we can even think clearly or begin to problem solve, because when we're highly emotional, we lose those abilities, right. and then imagine, like, we have a whole world of people just reacting to whatever emotion they're experiencing at any given minute. And then we wonder why this country is so messed up. So.
That's a different conversation. That's a totally different conversation. We might want to do that at another time.
Right.
Yeah. So let's talk. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was also going to say, and that would actually lead us into so after you are able to self-regulate emotionally with those coping skills, and you have more control over the body, and then more control over, and then more peace spiritually, then that's when the therapy, the talk therapy can come into play. And the number one treatment in talk therapy is EMDR. That's the go-to. And EMDR, if for anybody that's unaware, is the eye movement desensitization reprocessing. The title does not explain what it does at all. So, but the concept of that is something called bilateral stimulation. And what it does is, like I was explaining, the right brain hemisphere and the left brain hemisphere. And what happens is that left brain shuts down and the right brain is overactive. So we're now functioning day to day in a highly emotional place where we can only see things from our perspective, right? And a key thing in life is trying to get a more general view and try to think of things from other people's point of view, right? That's part of our emotional intelligence, right? So what the bilateral stimulation does, it could be through audio. So it'll go from, you'll hear it and right, left, or I use what they call tappers, where it's tactile stimulation, where you just hold these kind of like buzzers in each hand, and it just vibrates back and forth. Or the traditional way, and when EMDR was first developed, was the eye movement part, where it would go like a light, or people would use their fingers even and go back and forth, and you'd follow it with your eyes while you talked about certain aspects of the trauma. But that is exactly why, and what led into that perfectly is you said walking on the beach. And when I said running, it's that bilateral stimulation. Right. So you're moving both parts of your body, which is getting your brain to communicate.
Well, I have a whole set of midline exercises that I, work with my clients, and I assign it as homework, and that's just kind of the first step in doing that, that activity. It's an important thing. So let's talk a little bit about group therapy. Does that is that ever helpful? So we've talked about one-on-one therapy, but do you ever encourage group therapy?
Group therapy is actually wonderful. There's just a key to kind of where you would include that in the treatment. And it's always best to try to recommend group therapy before the individual therapy, because normally once people can, talk one-on-one and they feel safe and they know, it's confidential and, they have that built-in safety, they don't want to now go to a group setting. And so most people just won't do it. But there are a lot of benefits to group therapy because most people think they're alone, there's something wrong with them, it's just a lonely, trauma is just a lonely place to be. And the group therapy, it's peer support. And so they're hearing from other people, you almost like, you can get these light bulb moments in group therapy. I'm sure you've had them with clients and they go, what? I'm not, what? Other people do that too? But it's not just us telling them, they're hearing it firsthand from other people. And they're going, wow, I experienced that too. I had no idea. I thought it was just me.
Right.
So that alone just helps minimize so much anxiety and self-deprecation that, and just kind of normalizes what they're experiencing.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think what you do is absolutely awesome. And I love the way that you do it. It's truly one of my favorite ways of helping people, is just combining all these different things together, and you do it so well.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I really want to thank you for doing this today. Sharing your knowledge, your expertise with our listeners, I think is absolutely wonderful. And just so our listeners know your information, once again, this is Dr. Traci Moreno. She is a coaching psychologist from Free Spirit Coaching and Psychological Services. You can go to her website, freespiritcoaching.org, or you can call her at 480-220-0020. And once again, I just really want to thank you for sharing your knowledge and expertise with everybody. Is there any last minute thoughts that you'd like to share?
Let's see. Well, our spiritual coaching and the crystal Reiki healing can be done through Zoom. So that's probably all of our other treatments, of course, are somatic and experiential. You have to be on hand. But that is one that we can do with distance. And the puppy that you saw earlier is always out greeting clients as you walk in the door.
And what is the puppy's
about
name?
That.
Oh, that's sorry. Yeah, I never have to apologize for family. They live there. They don't know you're on Zoom.
Right.
So yeah, thank you so much
for having me.
Absolutely.